Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our discussion. My name is Romain Le Quiniou. I am the co-founder of a newly established think tank called Eurocreative. It is the first organization in France which focuses specifically on Central and Eastern Europe, including the Balkans, with the aim of increasing the understanding about this very important region, both for French civil society and also for political elites. I believe that we can all agree here that this is a very necessary work as France is, let's say, generally underestimating this specific countries. I'm delighted to welcome you all for this discussion regarding upcoming parliamentary elections in Croatia. These are very important elections and maybe the most uncertain one since the independence in 1991. More generally, 2020 is a very important year for Croatia. We all remember the last presidential elections and the victory of Zoran Milanovic, and so the beginning of political cohabitation. This year, Croatia, for the first time of its history, also assumed the EU presidency 7 years after its adhesion to the EU. A presidency which was quite atypical due to the dramatic context of pandemic across the world, but we will come back later to this issue. Just before the discussion starts, I would like to give some details about the ongoing situation in Croatia to give some context to our audience. Basically, in Croatia, there are two traditional political parties. On the one side, there is the current governing party led by Prime Minister Andrej Plenković, which is called the Croatian Democratic Union, HDZ, in Croatian, HDZ in English. And on the other side, there is the main opposition party led by Davor Bernardic, the Social Democratic Party, SDP in Croatian, SDP in English. It does also, to be precise, that SDP is competing in these elections within a greater center-left coalition called Restart. Currently, both sides are running neck and neck, according to the most recent polls, around 30%, and most probably they will not be able to secure a majority in the parliament by themselves. As such, the role of minor parties could be crucial this year. And in this game, there is the newly established radical right party and populist party called Domovinski Pokret, the Homeland Movement, which has been created by Miroslav Škoro, a former popular singer in Croatia, who ran a successful presidential election in 6 months ago. I think, if I remember well, he went third and he was around 24% of the votes. And so experts are saying that the most likely outcome of these elections could be a coalition between HDZ and Škoro's movement. So the question is, will it be a turning point or not? That's the main question we will try to answer with our guests. Apart from these elections, our discussion will also focus on the upcoming and numerous challenges that the country is going to face in the coming months and in the coming years, especially about economic and democratic challenges, but also, and it is very important, as we saw in this election, societal challenges. Finally, we will talk about the place and the role of Croatia within the EU, and specifically as a mediator between, on the one side, the EU and the Western Balkans regarding, of course, European enlargement process. For this discussion, I have the great pleasure to welcome our first distinguished speaker, Tena Prelec. Dobar dan, Tena.
Dobar dan svima. Thank you for the invitation and welcome, and hi, Roman.
Thank you. Tena, you're a political analyst, a scientist specialized in Southeast European countries, especially regarding corruption, EU enlargement, and migration topics. You are also a research fellow at the Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of Oxford, also a research associate at the London School of Economics. You are a doctorate researcher at the University of Sussex, and finally an active member of the Balkans in Europe Policy Advisory Group, also called BiEPAG. Our second distinguished guest is Hrvoje Butković. Dobar dan, Hrvoje.
Dobar dan. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks. Hrvoje, you are a political scientist specialized in the EU democratic processes and EU institutions. You are senior researcher associate at the Department for European Integration at Institut za razvoj I međunarodne odnose, also IRMO in English, which is maybe easier even for me. I practiced this name. And you are based in Zagreb. In the name of the whole Eurocreative Real team, we thank you a lot for your participation at this discussion. And I suggest that we can start with a question which is addressed to both of you. What do you take away from this election campaign? What were the major topics, and can we identify already winners, losers? What is your opinion?
Should I start?
Please go ahead.
All right. So, I mean, I think we can see from how the polls are going in the last days, especially that both major parties that you already mentioned, so the HDZ on the right side of the spectrum and the SDP, the Restart Coalition on the left-hand side, are predicted to lose some of the seats they had so far. So while these two parties have been converging in a center in some way, they have left ample space for alternatives to come up. So actually, a question that I received from a journalist yesterday was, but sorry, I need to ask you this. Is there any difference in their policies, or are they only different on ideological stances? And actually, it's the second. It's the way, you know, their programs or their stance on economic policies or foreign policy has become very, very thin in this moment. It's almost they have been converging quite a lot actually, and whereas the only, you know, real difference in this moment is on these ideological senses. So even more, you know, this criticism that is very often levied towards the mainstream of the Croatian politics, that basically the two main parties are one and the same thing, that it's the old way of doing politics. This criticism has come even further to the fore. And there have been, as you already mentioned, some new alternatives emerging. Definitely one of them, an important one, is this homeland movement by Miroslav Škoro, this former folk singer. And by the way, he's not the only singer who is running for election. There are many this time. So in that respect, in the musical respect, it's quite interesting, this election, if nothing else. But something that I would like to, you know, sort of explain regarding this homeland movement is that I do not think that we can see this as only, you know, as a new far-right party. Their real objective is actually to sort of take over the HDZ once again. And many of the people who are connected with this movement are, you know, formerly members of the HDZ who don't like the fact that it's going somehow, you know, a bit more towards the center under the Plenković's leadership, and want to take it over once again. So I think this is, you know, quite important nuance to grasp. On the other side of the spectrum, on the left-hand side, we have this new platform, a coalition between several parties, green parties and also far-left parties, social democrats, gathered around this party called the Možemo movement. It's a very interesting experiment. I think they've struck a chord, you know, with with a good constituency of citizens in terms of the new topics that they're bringing forward, and especially this theme of not giving up on politics, not just, you know, thinking that politics is this dirty thing that we can leave to the old elites, but really taking action ourselves. So these kind of messages that they have trying to put forward, I think they will have some resonance with the younger population, and especially with the people of Zagreb, where they have been active for a while already in the city council as well. We could also witness some relevant inroads in the center, because the former president of the Conflict of Interest Commission, Dalija Orešković, might get into the parliament, so it's marginal, but it's some new faces that could emerge. And I would say, you know, if there is a party that we could define as a relative loser until now of this campaign, I would say it's actually the HDZ, the ruling party, because they were expecting a very strong consensus for them, since they have managed quite well, I have to say, the beginning of the coronavirus crisis. So the beginning, there was a very strong, forceful reaction, and the number of cases, of coronavirus cases, was kept very low, and the trust of the citizens in the direction the country is taking was sky high. It went high very fast, but now, as the cases are coming up again, because there has been a partial reopening, they're going down as well. So this and other scandals that have happened in the meantime have made it so that there has been a partial boomerang of the expectations of what Plenković and his party wanted to get with pushing forward the elections forcefully earlier on rather than later. In respect to what they're going to get. So in terms of the major campaign topics, I would say that by and large, they remain unchanged for years now. The economy, regional inequalities, corruption, ideological stances, on minorities, and in a very disturbing way, there is this issue of women's rights and anti-abortion stances by some parties. So not only the Homeland Movement, but also this Most party that used to be kind of reformist or whatever. Now it's very much a right-wing party in its ideological stances. So aside from that, there hasn't been much new to talk about. For instance, one topic that is recognized by everybody across the board to be very important, the topic of emigration, of the fact that a lot of Croatian citizens are leaving Croatia especially since the entrance into the EU in 2013. It's repeated over and over again, but I haven't seen actually much action in terms of real plans and how to counteract it. So this is a general picture, I will say. Here.
Okay. Thanks. I think it was a complete picture of what is happening. Maybe Hrvoje, you have something to add, but I think we can also orientate the discussion on this. There is a traditional duopoly between HDZ and CDP. But in your opinion, with the emergence of this new movement, is this election the signal that we are having a turning point in the political game in Croatia? Is it moving? Is it changing? Is it also the sign when we see the Možemo coalition? Is it the sign that civil society, despite the fact that the population is overall they are quite disappointed with politics, but it's not just in Croatia, but is Možemo also an illustration that the civil society is getting more engaged in politics?
Well, I would say, I would start this by saying, if we look at the European Parliament election, this was 1 year ago, then the HDZ obtained the worst election result in its history, with only 23% of votes. And the Eurosceptics, both on the far right and the far left, obtained some 35% of the votes. So then it looks like, and most of these Eurosceptics were actually far right. So it looked like, some kind of a third party on the far right is forming, and this is going to be some kind of a third force. That's how it looked back then. But since then, I think things have changed greatly. I think that now these far-right parties are colliding around what we said, the Homeland movement led by Miroslav Škoro, and I think he's doing them more harm than good. In my view, he has actually taken aside this main topic which many far-right parties in Europe have, and this is this dilemma between globalization and protectionism. He has put that aside, and he has focused very much on this kind of tension between the private and the public sector. And he is so ardently against the trade unions that I really don't see how can anybody who is working for the public sector vote for the Homeland movement. And I think I would really be surprised if they gain more than 15% of the votes. So this is as far as the far right is concerned. On the far left and on this right side also, it is expected that most, as Tena has mentioned, will also pass the election threshold of 5%. So we will have, probably some representatives of the Homeland Movement most, and then HDZ, SDP, and then on the far left side, maybe Možemo, maybe somebody will pass, but it's always the question, will they pass the election threshold, which is rather high. Add maybe that, so my overall conclusion would be that the duopoly will stay. I think that we will be stuck with this duopoly between HDZ and SDP. And in this dilemma, who is going to actually form the government? Of course, the relative victor, the one which will have the relative majority, will have psychological, advance. But I think if you look at the situation, that actually SDP has a greater coalition potential right now than the HDZ, because the HDZ has categorically said that it will not go into coalition both with the Homeland Movement as with the SDP. So they really are on their own, and they could maybe later we will see what the situation will be. Maybe some independent people will pass, maybe form the government with them, with minorities. Of course, this is always a major game in Croatian politics. But SDP, if Možemo passes the threshold, if some parties on the far left pass this threshold, which is likely, then they have much greater coalition potential, I think.
Yes, thanks for this general overview to both of you. And I forget to mention our audience, but we are collecting also the questions online, on live on Facebook, and we would be glad to answer these. So maybe first we can start with the first question from the audience, and it's from Nicolas Lucic, and he asked basically there seems to be a green movement, all over Europe. But it seems, according to him, like nothing is going on in Croatia, even if there is a lot of small environmental defense organization. What do you think about this? Do you think that was green politics, was it a topic during this election? Is there a movement? Maybe also Možemo is taking this political space. Who wants to answer this question?
Yeah, I can go. So, right. I mean, the fact that now there is a party that is explicitly green and quite, talked about by now, shows that it is a topic in Croatia too. But it's not completely new. There was a party that did quite well at the European Parliament elections in 2014, ORAH. That was also a green party. But I would say that in general, yes, the green policies have been less a topic than what is warranted. I mean, what is needed in this moment in 2020. I mean, this is my personal opinion. I think, that parties have been definitely, lacking in that respect. However, at the debates, when pushed on this topic, all the parties would say, yes, of course, we're in favor of green policies in one way or the other. They would say that. And they were saying, to Možemo, you can't have the monopoly on green policies. We also think that too, without really being very concrete about what they do. So that's the difference that, Možemo has really, and I think some fringes of the SDP also have articulated it better, but Možemo especially. So I mean, the fact that green policies are a very big priority for the European Union in this moment makes it so that that this is more present in the Croatian public discourse as well, although not as much as needed yet. I don't know if Hrvoje agrees or not.
Well, I think that, traditionally we didn't have green parties. I mean, traditionally green parties were in Germany and Austria, and this is where they were very strong, and they were very much connected to the fact that Germany and Austria have a very huge industrial base, which is not the case in Croatia. So maybe that's part of the answer. But I think the green policies of today are much more turned to the left than they used to be. And so it is a bit crowded on the left side of the spectrum, you know, because we have the SDP, we have Možemo and Pametno and all of these parties, maybe they are lost in between all of these options on the left.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Of course, that's a great understanding of the situation, I think. Of course, we have to mention once again, because we are talking about that since many months now, but this election is due in a particular context, which is COVID-19. And Croatia is expected to experience a dramatic economic recession this year as a direct consequence, of course, of the COVID-19. Some reports identify a decrease around 9% in terms of GDP, which would be the third worst provision after Greece and Italy within the European Union. In addition, it is commonly known that Croatian economy is suffering from various structural problems, such as, to give you some examples, strong dependence on tourism industry, and so a lack of proper industrial sector, an important emigration, as you both mentioned, and an overextended public administration. So this question is to you, Hrvoje. According to you, is it possible to avoid a dramatic economic situation in Croatia? And more generally, is there political will to deal with the structural problems and to modernize the Croatian economy?
Well, I think that, Croatia now is in a much better place to address the challenges of the crisis than it was in 2009 when the financial crisis happened. Because back then we were not part of the European Union. And now, we are, since we entered the European Union in 2013, we increased our exports for some 15%, our exports to the EU member states for some 70%. We have benefited greatly from the structural funds, some 10 billion euros just from the current multi-annual financial framework. And from the upcoming one, it looks like we will get the double that amount. This is when you combine the money for the multi-annual financial framework and the recovery plan. And so I think we are much better structured to address the problems than we were before. Of course, we have, there are problems in our economy. We would need more greenfield and brownfield investment, and that comes with, more friendly business environment, reduction of the red tape, and all this is necessary. I think what the investors would certainly want is more predictability in the fiscal policy. I think, but I think that also many countries of the new Europe have perhaps a similar problem. I think that you have rightly said that the administration in Croatia is huge. One possibility to reduce it would be to reduce the number of the regional units, but that's a very hot political hot potato, which I don't think will be addressed by either government which will come to power. What else to say? So I think that, basically we are in a commenting on economy, some predictions say that our debt to GDP ratio will increase to some 90% from the current 75%. And this is really a dramatic increase. Mm-hmm. But with the monetary expansion policy at the level of the EU, with the historically low interest rate on the world financial markets, it is likely that our growth in the years after 2020 will be rapid. And in this scenario, we will be able to reduce our debt to below 70% in 2 to 3 years. So, we have problems. It is tough, but I think we are much better equipped to deal with them.
Yeah. So this is you are not that pessimistic, and the idea is that if there is no second wave, it will be manageable, of course. You talked also about the necessity to have foreign investments through predictability. And the necessity of foreign investment is also linked to another major challenge of Croatia. And maybe in this regard, Tena, you will answer this question about corruption, which is often considered as another major structural factor explaining Croatia's economic weaknesses. According to some reports, Croatia would be in the top 5 of the most impacted countries within the EU in this regard. What is your opinion about that? Is it getting worse, or is corruption more and more tackled? Are you optimistic about the evolution of corruption?
No, not so much. So definitely corruption is one of the biggest problems in the country. And it also has consequences for democracy. I'll get to that later, maybe. I mean, the thing is that, with the EU accession process, there was a lot of focus within it, specifically for Croatia's EU accession. There was a lot of focus on the rule of law, on the strengthening of the rule of law, and of curbing down corruption. It has managed to do so to a certain extent. I mean, it has managed, to bring some increased transparency. And I would say that petty corruption has been curbed to some levels, for sure. The problem is that corruption in Croatia is systemic, and it has been built during, this whole period of, the transition years, meaning from the disintegration of the former Yugoslavia, let's say 2 decades afterwards, more or less. They really it was a moment in which there were a lot of loopholes, if you can say so, mm-hmm. that could be exploited by individuals who were well connected with the new regime, and also who had the cultural and social capital to acquire during the late years of Yugoslavia. And they could leverage this to make a good result. So this, combined with a messy privatization process that has started during also the war years, complicated by the conflict, has made it so that a lot of big problems were created at that point, and some of these issues are still a problem today. So that's one big issue. There is the issue of clientelism. That also vitiates democracy to a certain point, because it has an impact on elections too. And it has an impact on the psyche of people, because if you look at the studies that have been done on the reasons why people emigrate, it's only partially because of the economy. It's only partially because they want more money. A lot of the motivations have to do with the fact that they want to live in a country where they can progress in a meritocratic way, without pulling strings, and in a way that in a country where their effort is actually rewarded. So there are these issues. There is, of course, the judiciary, which is a major problem in Croatia, the independence of the judiciary, again, especially at high levels. Mm. And also, the media, is a problem in this sense, because even though some fringe media, some more, smaller outlets are actually very, very competitive, like they have unearthed a lot of corruption scandals lately, but the state in which the public broadcaster finds itself, which is very poor at the moment, actually it's worse than it was 10 years ago, is not a valid counterbalance to these systemic issues. So there is this whole situation that makes it so that it's a very difficult problem to tackle. And I would say that it's quite a paradox that you have this example of the former Prime Minister Ivo Sanader ending up in jail as this major anti-corruption victory that has been done, in a EU accession country. And yet today, it's a big corruption. It's this grand corruption that still is present and is the main problem. Not so much, the more petty level of corruption. And this, you can see it during this election campaign. There was a wind farm scandal that has affected HDZ member, former mayor of Knin, of the city of Knin. So you can see, you know, that these issues, especially in these vulnerable sectors such as energy, are recurring. And I would say, you know, that this is worrying, you know, of course, for its impact on the economy, for its impact in general on society, but also really on the results on democracy. Because when you ask the people on the streets, you know, when we ask voters, what do you think are the main problems with Croatia? It's always going to be corruption and clientelism is one of the first ones. And this causes a lot of apathy. So this, for me, you know, is a big problem, that this issue exists in itself, but it's also connected with the reason why it's so difficult to change it, because people are so, you know, disillusioned by the way things in Croatia, that they end up being apathetic and not voting, not taking action.
Yeah, I believe it's something that we can see in other states, and that this problem of corruption is not just a problem of corruption, but it has a lot of consequences in immigration, in the state of democracy, of the rule of law. And we saw during these elections in the last month some problems towards free media, free journalism. And according to some reports, there is, let's say, a deterioration of the rule of law, even if it's not comparable, and it has to be said, to countries like Hungary or Poland. And maybe this question is to both of you. Do you agree with this feeling that there is a deterioration of the rule of law, of the democracy? And do you think, if yes, it will continue in the coming years? Are you optimistic? Maybe Hrvoje, to start with.
Yeah, well, I think that yeah, the corruption is a huge problem, but I think we should. And the problem is that that what Tena said, that people are disillusioned. They really expected that we will have less corruption once we enter the European Union, and this hasn't happened. And this is not just a subjective feeling, but also in many reports you see that since 2013 we are backsliding in reforms. And that's backsliding in our scores of how we are dealing with the anti-corruption, with corruption. And so there is really no political will, I would say, to tackle this problem on like a priority, to give it a priority and to really address it. And regardless whether you have the HDZ or the SDP, it seems to be the case. So it's a systemic corruption, and we would need certainly much better implementation of our laws, much more strict. We would need much more also, you know, very greater understanding of the conflict of interest is something that looks bad and shouldn't be done because it simply looks bad. Period. You know, it's not just the question of legislation; it's the question also of the awareness of everybody that this is how it is. We would also need to have, I think, you know, anti-corruption, how to say, plans on the level of each institution, where each institution would have a special plan how to combat corruption, where it would be aware that what are the sensible issues where the corruption could arise, and as such it should do their own, should we say, strategy of combating corruption at the institutional level. You know, that's what we need, I think. But I still, you know, it is a task which cannot be done overnight. And I think, yes, we are backsliding. But when you think where we were at the beginning of transition, you know, some of these concepts were not even such as the conflict of interest. We didn't even know that it exists, you know. So it takes time. I think it takes time. I think with time we could progress. But what we really need is the political will.
Yeah, and maybe to follow up.
A push on the side of the European Union, perhaps, to go in this direction.
Thanks for that. That was my question, maybe this political will can be motivated by the European Union, and if so, how is it possible? We know that the European Union is mostly focused on not really on the state of corruption in Croatia. I mean, in France, when we talked about Croatia, quite not that often, I will say, but when we talk about that, we talk mostly about the problem of historical revisionism, but not about corruption, not about immigration, which is not a topic that we really understand in the West, because we are receiving the people and not losing the people abroad. Do you think that the role of the EU is enough regarding this called structural problems? Is there enough attention from the European Union on these topics, especially corruption and immigration?
So, well, the European Union has created a new European Commissioner for Democracy and Demography, which is currently covered by the Croatian Commissioner, Dubravka Šuica. So it has been, it has recognized that the problem of demography, including immigration, is an issue. So at least that. But on the other hand, if you ask me if the European Union is doing enough, is even interested in tackling the deep-seated problems of corruption in Croatia, I mean, it clearly is not the case. And it is not the case because you see that, you see how strongly the EPP group is supporting the HDZ in Croatia unconditionally, as they're doing also, with Vučić in Serbia, although it's not a EU country yet. And to be honest, I mean, I have to be critical here. Part of the argument of stabilitocracy, which you might have heard about, of basically privileging stability over deep-seated democratization, is something that is often used in the context of the Western Balkan Six, the EU accession countries. But actually, it's also very much the same case, with BiEPP support for the HDZ in Croatia, or for their support for Bojko Borisov's party in Bulgaria, which is, very clearly and apparently involved in difficult governance issues. And also I have to say, so something that just came to my mind, I mean, ALDE, the party that is supposedly more, sort of super progressive and liberal and should have it more in their interest to keeping track corruption problems. I mean, one of the parties that are part of ALDE is the Turkish minority party in Bulgaria. I mean, the head of this party, Ahmet Dogan, has very clearly, their corruption scandals just out there. You just need to lift the lid, and yet there was no sound made not even by ALDE on these issues. So I really, put the responsibility on the EPP groupings on the European Parliament groupings to do more in this respect. They could call their members, they could call them out, but of course will not do it because of this political game in the EU. And in a way, the fact that Croatia is more or less a stable nation, the fact that the last government in ideological terms has not been very right-wing, has sort of tried to be more moderate at the surface at least, is something that absolutely suits the European Union and the EPP especially well. So I would say there is a problem there.
Yeah. Of course, there is a problem with EPP in certain countries, as you said, also with ALDE in some other countries. We can also mention corruption cases in the case of Czech Republic in Babiš and the party ANO, which is from ALDE. SND also have some problems with, let's say, when it was the government in Romania, the socialist government in Romania. So that's quite a big issue, I think, in the EU, and it's underestimated that there's three major European political groups, let's say, lack of political will in certain problems. And as we are gently sliding towards the European Union issues, I think it's time to come back to one of the biggest events of the year in Croatia, and it's in short, for the moment, European history, which was the EU presidency, which started in last January and which ended just a few days ago. expectations were really, really high on the Croatian side. I think that Plenković even said that it was an historic moment for Croatia, if I'm right. But the EU presidency is maybe not purely, but largely symbolic. The presidency is now over, and there is a feeling, in my opinion at least, that expectations are far from being fulfilled. Of course, the context of pandemic surely didn't help to fulfill these expectations. But after 7 years within the European Union, the assessment regarding Croatian integration seems a bit similar. A lot of expectations were formulated, maybe in Croatia, but also within the European Union, and also within the Western Balkan states, which were hoping that the integration is successful, and then maybe it can be a good thing for them in the coming integration. So would you, and this question is for Hrvoje, would you consider that expectations regarding European integrations are far from being fulfilled in Croatia?
Well, I would first say something short about the president. As you said, Croatia had two actually obstacles in being very successful in this presidency. This is, of course, the Corona crisis and the fact that we didn't hold a presidency before. So this was the first time that the country was presiding the EU. And I think, the most important measure of success of a presidency is to see if the agenda is moving. And I think that we managed to do this. I mean, if you look at the most important topics, we had in February the orderly Brexit. Now the talks are stuck, but we at least had the orderly Brexit in February. Then concerning the multi-annual financial framework, not much progress was done, but the recovery program was formed by the Commission, and it looks like despite opposition and some changes, which will certainly happen, it is a very good basis for discussion. And when it comes to Western Balkans, I would also claim that progress was made, but I think Tena will comment more on this topic. So I wouldn't say that the presidency was unsuccessful. It was perhaps overshadowed by the Corona crisis. I think that was the problem. Mm-hmm. And concerning the expectations of the membership of the European Union, when one talks about the European Union, you need to keep in mind that the EU budget is less than 1% of the overall budget of the EU's economy. So there is a limit to how much could be done. And from this budget, through the structural funds, Croatia has profited immensely. And one example is, the Pelješac Bridge, which is right now being constructed, which is going to be one of the largest bridges in the world, which will connect two parts of Croatia, and the size of this investment is some 400 billion euros and million euros, and it is being financed by mostly by the European Union. So it depends how you look. I would personally say that I'm not so dissatisfied. Yes, we have a problem with immigration. People are leaving, but many of these problems had the other countries which joined the European Union before us in 2004. And what happened then, for example, in countries like Poland, like the Czech Republic, is that the people have actually returned. Many of these people went to work in the West for a couple of years, and then they returned back to their countries with their know-how and with their connections, and this actually helped the economy. So I wouldn't be so pessimistic, about the prospects of Croatia. I think that it is good that we are in the European Union, and that it makes a difference. I don't know.
Yeah.
I could supplement something.
They are wishful words for sure. Yeah. And Tena, coming back to the recent presidency, the main Croatian objective was, of course, this intention to boost EU enlargement process. However, the EU Western Balkans Summit, which was held, unfortunately, virtually in Zagreb, led to disappointing results, despite, once again, very high expectations from Croatia. This time, of course, disappointment came mainly from the EU, as Brussels remained more than cautious, and that's quite an euphemism, regarding Western Balkans perspectives of European integration. Despite this disappointment, do you believe that Croatia will continue in this direction in terms of foreign policy, knowing that this will to be a mediator of EU enlargement was a little bit more complicated than what we can think today? And if yes, is it a way to reinforce Croatia's position at the EU level? Do you think that it's a strategy? And also a strategy to improve the relations with its Balkan neighbors, which are quite complicated in some cases, let's say that.
Okay, so let me start from the EU presidency. You know, I would say I would partially share Hrvoje's opinion that we shouldn't paint it only in dark terms, because especially like the intentions were there to make a success out of it. I would say, you know, if there was one thing in which the current government put a lot of effort in, was really preparing this presidency to be a stellar one. So they've reinforced their human resources capacity in Brussels a lot. They made a lot of preparations, they made trainings, And I mean, I heard, you know, from people in the institutions that they were very pleased with how it was shaping up at the beginning. So in a way, you know, the intentions were there, but then this big crisis happened. And I haven't seen, unfortunately, that, you know, that that they've managed to adapt to the circumstances in the right way and sort of to shift direction and to take another, you know, to take the momentum to maybe to do something else that would be seen as being good and inspiring. And yet, you know, we need to take into account the fact that these were exceptional circumstances. So coronavirus response was the first thing on the agenda. Now, you know, in terms of the Western Balkans, I would say that this, you know, this EU Council presidency of Croatia was really like the apex, the maximum point of the HDS's support for Western Balkans and for EU enlargement so far. Because so far it was very tepid. Some fringes of the HDS are outright, you know, sort of distancing themselves from the region. You hear very often, you know, that Croatia is not in the Balkans. That is this big also topic that the former president Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović said she took Croatia out of the region, meaning the Balkans. So if nothing else, you know, the fact that that it was because the timing was right, meaning that irrespective of Croatia taking the EU Council presidency, this discourse, this debate about a new methodology for EU enlargement and about the accession negotiations start for North Macedonia and Albania were on the agenda. So the fact that they were on the agenda has made, you know, the HDZ led by Plenković to take a more positive and approach towards it and to engage more with this topic. And I would say, you know, that in general, this fact is positive because, I mean, like it or not, if you want to define Croatia in the Balkans or not, I mean, it's almost a matter of preference or of worldview or however you want to put it. But I mean, Croatia is geographically close to these countries, so it is very important, you know, for it to engage with this topic. So how do I see it in the future? I would say that there, you know, the prospect of a possible coalition on the right between the HDZ and the Homeland Movement would be the scenario in which we would see actually a much tougher stance towards the Western Balkan countries and especially towards Serbia than the one that we're seeing now, you know, because they will have to prove it's a record that they're the real deal and that they you know that this is a stance that they would take. So I would say that in this case, you know, we would kind of veer from the current more positive stance towards EU enlargement. If not, it will stay as it is. But I mean, in terms of Croatia's influence in the process, on a whole, I think we need to be realistic and acknowledge the fact that Croatia is not a big player in this sense anyways, meaning, that the Western Balkans EU accession process is pretty much in the hands of, on the one hand, the ruling elites in the Western Balkans and what happens there. And on the other hand, in Brussels, the countries that count are not, Croatia is not among the top five, or even the top five countries that really count in this sense. So it's not the crucial deal maker in Brussels for EU enlargement. Nevertheless, I do hope that this tepid opening towards this topic continues.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Hrvoje, do you agree with this statement, assessment? Do you want to add something, or?
Yeah, well, I think that actually the fact that each country which the Croatia actually chose the summit to be on the Western Balkans, that means that actually the focus of the presidency was very much targeted towards the Western Balkans, and I think that that Plenković is. And before the summit, one should also say that, we had this agreement on the methodology. That's also a success of the presidency, that actually some kind of a compromise solution was found, and that is why the accession negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia received the green light. So, yeah.
No, but I mean, honestly, I can't, I wasn't in the room with Plenković, but the whole EU methodology debate was very much something that was led by France because of its skepticism, and France wanted to have something that was a bit of a compromise or something to sell to its voters, that they're doing something in terms of EU enlargement before opening this negotiation.
But in a position of a presiding country, you need to find the compromise. You are the one who are actually patching up this compromise between France and Germany and all of these countries, and I think Croatia was successful in this respect.
Right. Okay, I mean, I wouldn't overstate Croatia's, role in doing so, but nevertheless, it's a good thing that at least, some steps forward were made in that respect. Where do we go now? Nobody knows, because now it's completely unclear where we go with EU enlargement, but at least these partial inroads were made, and they were made under the Croatia's presidency. So in that sense, you're quite correct.
Mm. So I see that also. Thanks for all the answers. I think the debate about EU enlargement is involving France a lot, unfortunately. And as you know, in France, it's not a debate. And I personally think that it's a great problem for us, because of course we can have a position, whether it's against or in favor. I think it's mostly for internal political reasons, but at the moment there is no debate within the French society about EU enlargement. So I hope it will evolve. But as you say, Tena, things are quite, let's say, we don't know where we are heading towards. So we'll see. Wait and see. As a conclusion, I would like to come back to what you say about Grabar Kitarović, who said that more or less, I don't remember if you quoted her or not, but Croatia is not in the Balkans, because it's quite linked with a question we had from the audience, and also it can be a sort of conclusion. So basically the question was, Croatia has been a member state of the EU since 2013. Today, do you think that Croatians are considering themselves more as Europeans, Balkan people, Balkanist, I don't know how to say in English, sorry, or just only Croatians? And basically, to put this question in a more general context, according to you, where is the Croatian society heading towards? To both of you, maybe as a conclusion.
In terms of Balkan versus EU, Europe dilemma? in this sense. But I think it's a false dilemma. I think we all in Europe, the Balkans and we, and it just, you know, and you cannot escape your geography. You are where you are, you know. So I think that eventually all the Western Balkan countries will join the EU. There is no other solution. I hope it will be sooner rather than later. I think that what they need is more encouragement, more concrete, benefits to support them on their path to the EU membership. And I would like to see them as members as soon as possible. It would be very good for Croatia in economic terms, in political terms, in terms of stability of the whole region. And I have no doubt that it would be beneficial. But the region is burdened with problems, which are largely bilateral between these countries and which need to be resolved. And I think in the upcoming period, Europe will need to focus much more on assisting the region in finding solutions to its long-term political problems and economic, of course.
Yep.
Yeah.
Tena?
Yeah, so in response to your question about how the Croatians feel about themselves, what their identity is, so there is a relatively recent research project carried out by Jeran Pavlaković and colleagues that has concluded that Croatia has had one of the best state building experiences of the region in terms of how people perceive themselves as Croatians. So, you know, we can say that the vast majority of people living in Croatia, they're very much saying that their country is Croatia and that they feel Croatians. At the same time, I would say that they also, you know, that virtually nobody in Croatia, I mean, nobody that I know at least, would say that they are not European at the same time. These Eurosceptic positions are very minor. And I think that, you know, those parties that assumed Eurosceptic views, it was more as a pragmatic way of countering the elites in power rather than as something that is really eradicated among the population. I mean, the general sentiment in Croatia, I would say that it is, you know, that they are part of the European Union and of Europe more in general. Even though there are some, you know, some grievances in terms of the people versus the elites here too, but that's another matter. So that would be, you know, part of the answer in terms of whether they feel themselves, whether they feel as Balkan or not. I mean, I don't have the numbers here, but I would say that, you know, that the studies that were carried out recently are most relevant. Say that in general, you know, the state building process is kind of concluded, that most Croats would feel as more, you know, quite strongly attached to their own identity. And yet, you know, also coming back to what Hrvoje was saying about the fact that we're very interconnected with the region. I mean, my generation and my friends, we're very much, you know, a network of people who feel again at home in many places in the neighborhood and around Europe. So I think that these lines are blurring. Yeah, I think we reached a peak more or less of you know, nation building and being proud about our own country. And I think that now there is a constituency of people, especially with this increased emigration and migration, that has a more fluid sense of identity.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's a perfect conclusion. And if I can conclude and go back to the questions, to the initial questions, are this election will be a turning point? The conclusion is most probably not. Probably not, but they will symbolize some political evolutions, which are really important because we are in a context of deep changes, both in Croatia, in Europe, and more generally in the world, in the international relation system. Croatia will be facing important challenges, mostly economic, but also in terms of corruption, of immigration. But we should not be just pessimistic about that, because Croatia has also the potential to come out with solutions, with positive actions to deal with these problems. solutions which come from civil society movements. We can see a lot of dynamism in the defense of social minority rights, some groups that are fighting also for the defense of democracy. We can see also a lot of dynamism in politics, a lot of debates, and that's one of the most important things in a society. We can see political will in the international relations as well. So Croatia has the capacity to deal with these problems. The answer will be known soon, because even if these elections are not a turning point, they are really important for the upcoming years and months. So on these words, I would like to thank you a lot for your participation, for great insights, and for your ideas and commentaries on what is going on in Croatia. I will even try to say that in Croatian. So, hvala dla participacja. Yes? Is it okay?
Yes.
More or less.
Let's say just hvala. Hvala is okay.
Hvala.
And so I would like to say also that this video will be available online tomorrow on YouTube. Eurocreative will also publish analysis of this election and publish it tomorrow in French for French audience then. And I would like to thank also our audience for following up, for asking some questions, really interesting ones. And I would like to thank also our collaborators which participate in the making of this discussion. So Anna, Lucy, and Sofia. And so see you soon. And let's focus on these elections.
Merci à tous. Thank you. And go vote if you're in Croatia. It's important.
Of course.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.